Stephen Jarvis, how are you doing today, sir?
Greg, I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, you too, man. Always a blast to chat with you. So let's just jump right in here.
Yeah.
Why don't you take a moment to tell us about your practice and what you specialize in?
Yeah. So I'm a CPA, which don't stop listening yet. I promise I'm a little bit different than most CPAs. In fact, I tell people I'm the least boring CPA they know. And I created a firm a little over 5 years ago now, Retirement Tax Services, with this specific idea of working with taxpayers and their financial advisor. Because at the end of the day, tax is my area of expertise, and I want to stay focused in the area that I'm best at. But taxes are never the whole conversation. They shouldn't be the whole conversation. This is one piece of a person's financial life. And so what we found was there was this huge need for CPAs, for tax professionals who would proactively work with financial advisors who are helping a client navigate their entire financial picture to make sure the tax piece is handled correctly. And so that's what I spend my time doing. I work a lot with financial advisors to help them understand taxes better, but I work with taxpayers as well to make sure that the work they're doing with their financial advisor gets reported on their tax return correctly.
Okay, I love that, and I love how you started this with the least boring CPA instead of the most interesting. Right? No, I think it's
No,
both.
very,
I love
very
it.
intentional.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. I love that. Why don't you take a little bit and just kind of tell us more about what inspired you to do this? Because, you gave us a great elevator pitch, but maybe we could go into a little bit more about your inspiration to do this.
Yeah, I grew up around financial planning. When I was a kid, my dad got into the industry and did that while I was in high school and college, and so I was around it a lot. When I was going to college, I did back office support for a financial planning practice, and so I was exposed to the industry. But ultimately, accounting seemed when I was in college, accounting seemed very intuitive to me. It seemed like I excelled at, it, and there were a lot of jobs in accounting. So I made a very practical decision and said, "Hey, it's 2008. It feels like no one's ever going to get a job again. I'm going to go into accounting so I always have a job."
Hmm.
And when I got to the first accounting firm, I could tell that I didn't really fit a lot of the stereotypes of a lot of stereotypical CPAs, but I wasn't sure what the alternative was. So I spent 10 years at big public accounting firms because that's what they told us we should do. That if you wanted to be a good little CPA, you're going to go work at a big national firm, you're going to become a partner someday. And so I did that for about 10 years. I was on the cusp of becoming a partner at a large national firm. But I mean, I kind of had some reservations at different points in my career of like, hey, does the stuff I do really have an impact? Is it valued? Like, am I helping individuals? Not that there's anything wrong with working for big companies, but it was just getting to the point where the work I was doing was always on such massive projects for such big companies. It didn't really feel like I was having an impact on individuals or families.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, I had stayed connected with the financial planning industry, but kind of loosely. And I had some financial advisors kind of come to me and say, hey, we can't find CPAs who will play nice with us. And we're not sure how to solve it, but we really think there's an opportunity here. And so, kind of based on some of those conversations, I started looking into it and realizing, oh, there is a huge opportunity here because there's more and more financial advisors who are acknowledging and recognizing like taxes are a pretty big expense in most people's life and
Yeah,
something that we can be intentional about. But we need to make sure we have all the right people at the table to make sure this gets done correctly.
I love it. What are some of the things that you found that you're able to give more attention to in serving individuals and families that you couldn't do when you were at a larger firm? Obviously, that was one of the big inspirations, other than the fact that you realize, I don't really fit the typical CPA mold,
Yeah.
you know? So it's kind of like a combination of those two things where you wanted the freedom to kind of be yourself, and there was
Yeah.
opportunity there, but also to better serve individuals and families. So, what are some of the benefits of you going on your own and how you could serve other people in a way that you couldn't when you were at the larger firm?
Yeah, I mean, so on a day to day, getting to work directly with taxpayers, within consumers, with individuals, and as we go, even do something really simple and routine like just preparing their tax return. There's a big difference on me being able to get on a call with you and saying, "Hey, here's the tax return I prepared for you. Here's some questions I have. Here's the end result." You being able to ask your questions, and you being able to get to the end of that and saying, "Hey, Stephen, thank you for taking care of this. It was a big stress in my life. I appreciate that you and your team were responsive, that you took care of me. I really feel like you did a great job." That's a big difference than what I was doing before, which I was working on these huge projects where we had 10 people on our team, and we're doing,
Mm,
we're doing these things that on paper might seem really exciting, but you get to the end of it, you send off a PDF of whatever the end result was, and you're not really clear on what the impact was other than checking a bunch of administrative boxes.
mm,
So that might feel overly simplistic, but even just being able to have that connection with a person who says, "Hey, I really appreciate what you did," like that,
yeah,
I, that that makes a difference on how we kind of
yeah,
live our day-to-day life.
yeah. So you wanted to have more impact and see the impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to work more closely with these people and better
Yeah.
understand the nuance in the situation. And quite frankly, it sounded like also, I don't want to say your motivation was to get recognition, but you liked seeing the impact of your work and you in a more intimate way, because it sounds like taxes are a pretty big lever, um, that you could pull for people and for your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And there might subconsciously be part of that. I'm like, we all like knowing that we're important and all those things. So subconsciously there might have just been a big ego part of it. But it really was, it wasn't so much that like feeling the need for recognition as it was like just wanting to be able to clearly see like this has a positive other than, I mean, at the firm I was working at, I certainly got a paycheck twice a month. Like I was providing for my family, like I was checking some practical boxes, but it was tough to be really convinced like, hey, this has an impact. And so getting to work with taxpayers directly. The other piece of what I do, I actually, in any given year, I work with hundreds, if not thousands, of financial advisors on kind of education and training to help them help even more of their clients. So there's the clients I work with directly. Then there's also this kind of amplification effect of when I go work with an advisor, which I still do kind of one-on-one or in small group settings. So I get to hear from them. And 6 months later, they'll reach back out and say, "Hey, Stephen, this thing you taught me, the strategy we worked through, I was able to help a dozen clients with that, and it was so great to see." Like being able to
I
hear those
love that.
stories is really exciting and motivating.
Yeah. So you also get big into the education piece.
Yep, I do a lot of public speaking. We've created some courses for advisors. We host an event every year. Like we're trying to, we saw this huge gap, and like there's within the financial planning industry, there's different reports that come out of how many financial advisors think they provide tax planning versus how many clients think they get tax planning, and there's this huge gap. And so there's this big area, and I mean taxes are one of the biggest expenses that any of us will have in our lifetime, and certainly during retirement, and there's just not a lot being proactively done about it. So we have this enormous divide to kind of cross, and so I just don't have enough hours in my day to work with 330 million Americans to
Yeah.
to do this, and so me being able to work through the financial advisors amplifies that effect I'm able to have.
I love that. So you found that you can have an even greater impact by serving advisors and helping and empowering them to serve their clients. So I love that. Okay, let's quickly talk about your clients and who you serve.
Yeah,
So thank you so much for telling us more about your story. Now let's talk about your clients. So
yeah.
where do they typically find you? How do they get into your world?
Yep. So my clients all come through financial advisors. So my kind of a lot of the stuff I spend my time doing is creating content for financial advisors. Whether that's I've been published in or I've been written articles in well-known publications. I've guested on a lot of podcasts. I've spoken on a lot of stages, primarily focused towards financial advisors. And so then these financial advisors get involved in coaching programs that we have and training programs that we have. And for some of them that are kind of the right fit for who we specialize in working with, they'll say, "Hey, I actually need someone who can help my clients prepare their tax returns." And so that's where we get introduced to clients that we ultimately work with, is they have a financial advisor that's in our network, and they're a fit for what we're doing.
Okay, so how do you determine if they're the right fit? What qualities do you look for?
Yep. So when we started this, we one of well, as I looked at across kind of the tax profession at large, one of the challenges that I saw was that the way CPAs are kind of trained early in their careers is like, hey, you're a CPA, that means you know all the things about all the things, and you need to be able to do all the things everywhere. And I'm intentionally saying that very broadly because that's how it felt when I was early in my career. Is like, you're a CPA now, you can do all the things. And so you have a lot of tax preparers who, if regardless of what your tax situation is, like they're going to try and help you, and they probably do a decent job. But like most areas of life, if we can specialize or focus on a narrower slice of the pie, we're probably going to do a better job. So when we started, we said, okay, instead of trying to do all the things, we're going to pick one thing and do it really, really well. And the other thing that we saw is that a lot of CPAs are kind of pushed towards working on the most complex situations. They want to work on business entities that have lots of different structures and all of this thing. And so the people who a lot of times are underserved by the tax prep world are high earning or currently high earning professionals, or people who were high earning during their career and are now retired, have pretty decent assets, but aren't, they're not, I mean, whatever threshold, we're not talking 20, 30 million plus of net worth. We're talking maybe like 1 to 10 million. They've worked really hard. They've made a few
Yeah.
$100,000 a year throughout their career. So that it's more complicated than doing it themselves on TurboTax, but they can't find a CPA who wants to specialize in helping them. So that's who we work with. We work with people who, I mean, I have clients kind of all over the spectrum, but it's primarily individuals and families. We do a ton of 1040s, the individual tax filing every year. We have some clients that are retired, and maybe they have $100,000 of income on their return, and they've got other investments that have tax play that goes with them. All
Yeah.
the way up to, I've got a couple of clients who are either high earning W-2 employees, getting equity comp, or they've just they've been diligent. The
Yeah.
other piece I'll throw in there really quick, Greg, is that we're looking for people who are willing to take a long-term perspective. Like we're not trying to just turn out 1040s every year. Like we want to be able to have proactive conversations with the client and their advisor.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not TurboTax, right?
Mm.
This is focused on more of a longer term relationship that evolves, right?
Yep.
Okay, I love that. So one of the things that I've learned, and I'm sure you know, and anybody in this industry, is that in the importance of it being the right fit, right? A
Mm.
mutually beneficial fit. What
Yeah.
are some of the ways that you ensure that you're pairing the right advisor with the right individual? Is that something that you do, or something that you think about? Do you make those connections, or help me understand how that works? If
Yeah.
it's even a relevant question.
No, it is a relevant question, but it's more of a byproduct of the other things we do as opposed to a separate process on its own. And so,
Interesting.
so, so since the advisors we work with, they've already, like, I'm not getting cold calls from advisors saying, hey, I need a tax preparer who's this Stephen Jarvis guy. Because of all of the content I put out, there aren't very many well-known CPAs in the financial planning world. I happen to be one of them. There's literally probably a handful of us. There's 4 or 5 that
Yeah.
the industry at large can name, and I happen to be one of them. So when advisors come to us, they know who I am. They know what I'm about. They've heard me speak. They've read what I write. Like they know what I'm about, and so there's already kind of a self-selection of they're already opting in because they know who I am.
Right.
And so then, and
Yeah.
they come in and they join one of our training or membership programs. They're getting access to additional resources from us. They're getting exposed more to kind of me behind the scenes. And so the things I teach advisors about are the same things I do with the clients I work with directly. So I mean, it seems like a foreign concept on the internet these days, but I just go with super transparency and consistency. Like if
Yeah.
if I get on a podcast and talk about here's how I approach this tax planning situation, that's the same thing I'm going to turn around and do with I'm going to apply it to their specific situation, but people aren't surprised by how I work with their clients.
Sure.
And so there's a huge self-selection
Sure.
process.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when you do content and training, and you have a big focus on marketing.
Yeah.
People get to know you,
Mm-hmm.
and like you said, they can kind of self-select. So you naturally attract the people who resonate with and jive with what you're doing, and then um, I don't want to say push away, because that's not really it, but it's like a self-selection process. The people who vibe with what you're doing are drawn to you, and those who prefer a different vibe, just naturally go somewhere else. So it's a really intuitive kind of thing, it sounds like.
Yep. And I try to be really early and often. I try to be super transparent about what I am about and what I'm not about, and
Yeah.
and not because I think the way I do it is the only way to do it. Because again, like I've intentionally specialized in areas and excluded others. And so sometimes I'll give you one example of things I don't do. I don't do international tax. Not because I have anything against people who have dual citizenship or earning money in another country. I think that's fantastic. Please do. But it's a specialized area of tax. And even when an advisor comes to me, I'm already working with,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have a new client, they say, hey, this happened this last year. It's like, hey, I have a client that's getting ready to move to the UK, and they need tax help. Can you help with that? And I say, absolutely not. But I'm happy to introduce you to someone who can.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not because I have anything against that situation, but there are areas where you want a specialist. And so by being super transparent and clear up front, it helps everybody have a better experience.
Right. Well, I also like that too. And every time you say yes to something, you implicitly say no to something else. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to be intentional and clear, and like you said, being transparent. Is this something that you feel like you've fallen into as you've taken action and tried different things, or were you just like this right away? Because I know a lot of my clients will come to me who are advisors, and they'll want to do everything all at once
Mm.
because other people kind of told them to, and they think they have to. But that's not always the best thing to do. So you got to kind of take action, experiment, see what feels right to you, and intentionally start saying no to a lot of things. Have you found that that's true?
Yeah, I think like most things, there's a spectrum, and there's certainly areas where that really resonates. Where it's easy for, I mean, 5.5 years into this specifically, I'm over 15 years into being a CPA in general. So there are definitely things I have learned through sometimes painful experience along the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's got to happen. It's inevitable, right?
yeah, some things though we're very intentional to begin with. So this when we started the firm, this focus on like, hey, we're going to serve this narrow group of people. That's been there all along, and I'm really glad that we did that. And I'm really committed to continue to do that. As far as, I mean, you mentioned the marketing side and like some of the content I'm putting out. There's definitely things I've learned along the way of formats and mediums that I do enjoy and that I don't enjoy, like places I spend my time, topics I talk about, how often I talk about different topics. So there's definitely a learning process through all of that. And there's been times where I've tried things where I'm like, oh, that didn't work the way I expected. Let's pivot back and do the things we know work.
I love it. All right, let's take a second to talk about vision for your practice.
Yeah.
Um, in business, nothing stands still. It's dynamic, not static.
Yeah.
And you're an ideas guy. You're a visionary too.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a certain expectation to live up to, being the least boring CPA, right?
Yeah.
So, when it comes to your practice, where do you see it in the next few years? What's your vision? What goals are you working on? Where do you want to take it?
Yeah. So our not so understated goal is to transform the way that financial advisors do tax planning. Right. And so there's a few pieces to that. And so thankfully, there's been a lot of interest in what we're doing, a lot of demand for what we're doing. And so one of the challenges for us is then how do we keep those things balanced? Because some things only scale so far. I mean, I've got 24 hours in the day just like everybody else. And so while we get tons of demand for the direct tax preparation, the tax returns have to get filed every year. That becomes a really challenging part to scale because it's hard to find great team members to add, to make sure the training stays up, to like those kind of pieces of it. And so we honestly, we turn away business every year on the tax prep side because if we're going to take it on, we want to make sure that we can do a quality job. And so as I look at the next couple of years, we absolutely want to be able to keep doing more tax prep for people because again, those tax returns have to get filed, and we're exploring all sorts of different things, including hiring people directly onto our team. We're exploring how we build out like different resources within the team, or signing CPAs versus support staff to help them do the returns in the background. We're looking at strategic partnerships with regional firms to say, hey, could we leverage someone who does have a big team but then can follow our approach to how we collaborate with financial advisors? So I mean, these are things that I'm excited to see how they pan out over the next couple of years. But just because of kind of the talent crunch within the accounting industry, it'll like we've got to be creative, and it'll be interesting to see how those next couple of years pan out.
Interesting talent crunch.
Mm.
I wouldn't think that would necessarily be a problem in the industry. I'm totally ignorant, so this is coming from a layman. But you would assume that there were a lot of talented people who understood tax. But as you're saying that, I'm like, well, that probably doesn't really make a lot of sense. I'm sure there's a shortage of skilled people in every industry.
It does feel that way. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So, all right. Let me throw this one at you.
Please.
We never do this alone, right? Owning a business. Sometimes I think we like to have our our pride, and it's all up to me, and good morning, bro. And it's not the situation. So as your practice has grown, are there any programs or trainings that have shaped your approach and maybe positively impacted how you serve your clients? Is there anyone you'd like to give a shout out to?
Oh, geez, there's definitely a lot of people that have had an impact on what I do. It's a combination of, I mean, I have a couple of partners that I'm doing this with who are financial advisors. On the day to day, they serve more in an advisory role, but they're some of the people who kind of came to me and said, hey, like there's this huge need where we need a CPA, a dynamic CPA who can help fill this. So I definitely have business partners that have been very strategic in that. One thing I didn't do early on that I've been trying to do, been a lot more intentional about the last probably 18 months is finding other peers, other people who are doing something similar to me, running small tax firms, trying to collaborate with financial advisors. And so I've got a small group of CPAs that I meet with on a regular basis so that we can share ideas, talk about what's working, what's not, learn from each other. There's conferences that I go to every year. The AICPA, which is the kind of governing body for CPAs, puts on a great conference every year. I was just there a couple weeks ago. But some of it has also just been associated with other business owners, regardless of what industry they're in. I think there's tremendous value and motivation that comes from being able to hear other people's experiences and seeing that we're all kind of grinding through this together.
Definitely. Yeah. Grinding through this together. That's for sure. Good stuff, man. All right. At this point, what I want to start doing is I want to better understand what it looks like to kind of work with you,
Yeah.
or work with your team rather.
Yeah.
So maybe you could walk us through your actual kind of process and help paint a picture of what it looks like to start working with you. So if somebody were to become a client or customer of yours
Yeah.
today, what happens the first couple of weeks? Maybe what does onboarding look like? What does it look like to work with you during the course of a calendar year? Can you just kind of walk us through that and help us understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to talk about this from the taxpayer's standpoint. And so, I mean, I think we have a lot of advantages in how we set up our model. But one of the advantages we have is that an advisor is already pre-screening who they think will be a good fit for us. And we've given them criteria for what that looks like. And we've said, here's who we work the best with. And so typically when we start working with a client, their advisors already introduced them to who we are and what we do. A lot of times they've given permission for their previous tax returns to be sent to us so that we already have context as to who they are and what they're all about. Sometimes they're getting signed up with us for a specific need. They have a planning situation. They've got a life change or something we need to go ahead and jump in and address, or it's just getting set up for the next tax year. So when they first onboard, I mean, there is a lot of regulatory and compliance that goes on with tax preparation, so that there are some fairly automated steps at the beginning of, here's our service agreement, here's the engagement letter. We need you to acknowledge that we're working with your financial advisor so that we can share information back and forth and do all the IRS things. We got to verify your identity, all these types of things. And so that's a little bit of the onset. And then depending on the time of year that someone joins, it's going to affect what their kind of initial experience is. We have a lot of people who sign up late in the year, getting ready for the next filing season. And so at that time of year, we're really focused on getting everybody onboarded, checking in to see if there's anything that needs to happen before the end of the calendar year. Because sometimes there's things that once the calendar turns over, we can't change. And so we need to make sure, hey, is there anything we need to talk about before the end of the calendar year? And then it's getting people ready for the tax filing season, because while there are a lot of other things that we do and are involved in, at the end of the day, we still need to get a tax return filed every year.
Sure.
And so we have a portal that we use that the client's advisor also has access to, so we can all collaborate. We're sending out messaging about timing of when we're going to do things, about documents that we need. One of the things that we do that's becoming a little bit more common in the industry, I hope more people will adopt it. We actually have clients go ahead and opt into when they would like their tax return done. So instead, we run our firm virtually, so nobody's coming into our office. It's all virtual. But our clients get an email that says, hey, go ahead, here's our calendar. Go ahead and pick when you think you're going to have all your tax documents available. And we can go ahead and schedule ahead of time so you know when your tax return is going to get worked on. A lot of our clients then will have a Zoom meeting to go over their return live with us. Some clients don't prefer that, and we just send them a video that says, hey, we're done with your return. Here's what the draft looked like. Here's some things we want to highlight. Let us know if you have any questions. But regardless, that way we have clear expectations, because that talking to other tax professionals, other taxpayers, that becomes a real pain point for the tax prep process is, okay, I sent off all my documents and I haven't heard anything. Where are things at? Right. And I think both the professional and the consumer kind of add to the challenge there sometimes. Yeah. We'll have clients, even clients we've worked with for a few years, who on Wednesday, they'll submit their last document. On Thursday, they'll say, Stephen, where's my return? And
Every
that
time, man. Come
Yep, and
on.
that
Yeah.
that really started going away when we had people schedule, because then they knew, because it wasn't, it's not that they have unrealistic expectations, they just didn't have any expectations. And
Sure.
so when we went to scheduling, then even if they submitted everything on February 18th, they can see, oh, I selected March 2nd for my meeting with Steven or with a team. And so yeah, I'm probably gonna get some questions before then, but March 2nd is the date I'm tracking towards. So that really helps everyone just have a clear experience.
Yeah, I love that. Just setting those expectations, clearly communicating. I love how you've made it easy and simple, especially if somebody has a complex situation. You just made it simple and very easy for them. And I love how you quarterback with the advisors too. I think that's great. Before we wrap up here, and you
Yeah.
tell us where to go to learn more about you, um, what's the skull for?
Well, the skull is new. I'll come back to the skull because I'll start with the medals, because the medals have been there for a long time. And usually when I have a new client, you asked about the onboarding process. Usually the first call I get on with a new client, very first question. Sometimes they'll skip right even past names. They'll just go, "What are all the medals for?" And so, I mean, it is very intentional, because in a virtual world, like there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained in a virtual world for
Uh
sure,
huh.
but
Yeah.
I'm still helping somebody with a very personal topic, something that's very important in their life and something that they want to feel a connection on. And so what I've found is that by having these medals hanging in my background that are from races that I do, it gives us an instant connection point and something that they're going to remember and they're going to ask me about every time. And we can spend 2 minutes talking about my races and then feel more connected to each other.
Sure.
And so the medals are they're from, a lot of them are Spartan races. There's some triathlons in there, some just running races. But for me, it's kind of a visual representation of my commitment to being physically and mentally healthy.
I
The the
I love it.
the skull specifically was from an event I did this summer called the Spartan Summer Death Race, that ultimately ended up being a 65-hour endurance event. They gave us very little information coming in other than it won't be longer than 72 hours. Only 6 people finished. I was one of them, and the skull was kind of the prize for that.
Congrats.
Uh, and yeah, we did a variety of things over those 3 days, almost 3 days. Not sleeping was not one of those
You
things.
are well. You I'm sure you slept well after, but you are definitely living up to that least boring CPA reputation. And I love the background, man. It definitely tells a story, which is, mine's intentional too. I've got all my favorite books. I've got,
Yeah,
that tells, little stories about my life, and, the drum set,
absolutely.
because I'm a musician.
Of
And,
course.
you gotta have fun with it. Everything's a story. So, all right, Stephen, thank you so much for coming on, telling us about yourself, and more importantly, telling us about the people that you serve and that you help. For anyone who's listening, who wants to get in touch with you or learn more
Yeah.
about you and maybe possibly working with you, what should they do next? Where should they go?
Yeah, best place to find me, connect with me, follow along with what I'm doing is on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Uh, it's a lot of it's geared toward, it's written as if I'm talking to financial advisors, but really it's written in a way that it's helpful for taxpayers as well. You can go to my website, retirementtaxservices.com. But LinkedIn's the place I'm most active and the best place to connect with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephen.